Yeah, I'm wispem-wantex. I'm an orange circle on the internet. And I recently did the revamped Uniswap app, which you may have seen. And I'm going to be talking about narratives and the personal server narrative in particular. So if you follow me on Twitter, you know that I'm very interested in narratives. Narratives are really powerful because they affect the way that people think about things. And the way people think about things affects how they behave. So ultimately, narratives control the flow of resources like time, energy, money, what people put effort into making. And the power of narrative is that they create unity in large groups of people. So if you're into AI at all, you may have heard of AI alignment. Alignment applies exactly the same for the same reasons to organizations of people. And narratives are a tool that we use to coordinate large groups. And for that reason, it's important to have good narratives for any large project, any large organization. And I'm going to talk about some of those. So the structure of this talk, first up, I'm going to talk about some narratives that I think are not so good, not necessarily bad, but maybe they have some problems with them, in my opinion. I'm going to talk about the personal server narrative, which I think is a particularly good narrative, which is really at the heart of what Urbit is. And I'm going to expand on what I think that implies for app developers. And then I'm going to fudge shrubbery. So that's fear, uncertainty, and doubt, for those who don't know. OK. So these are some bad narratives. This is like a little bit inflammatory on purpose. I don't actually think these are all bad, but they have some flaws, some drawbacks. So first of all, the personal server narrative was sort of the original narrative of Urbit in many ways. For those who don't follow along closely to Urbit goings-on, it sort of fell out of fashion within the last year or so for a couple of reasons. Primarily that calling Urbit a personal server kind of feels weird because a personal server is sort of a prerequisite for Urbit. You have to have a personal server and then you run Urbit on it. So that makes the term a little clunky. So a personal server is really about the idea of owning your own data, privacy, permissionlessness, access, and so forth. And so you can sort of have this personal server without running a personal server if you use a hosting service. But then that kind of conflicts with the other aspects of the personal server, because then somebody else has access to it. You don't really own your data in the most fundamental way, and so on. So there's a little bit of conflict there. And to my understanding, the foundation has sort of been moving away from that term, or was at one point. So personal server may just be a bad label for the term. I'm going to obviously loop back to this and say why I think it's good. The concept, maybe more than that particular term. I don't know if there's a better word for it. If you ask most of the core developers what is Urbit, you'll probably get an answer that's something like Nockhoon and Arvo. So this is like the core idea of Urbit: functional programming, solid-state interpreter, high-level determinism. So that's I think how most of the core developers think about Urbit. But I think there's a conflict between that and how most users of Urbit think about Urbit. I would venture to say that if you ask the median Urbit user what is Urbit, they would most closely associate it with Azimuth, the cool little nicknames that you get, the ID system, which is sort of like this. It's integrated, but it's also sort of its own parallel system, and it's like the relationship is like sort of. I don't know. It's not. It doesn't nest perfectly under this description. Azimuth is sort of its own thing. You can use it outside of Urbit. Yeah, okay. Another narrative that I think is actually really bad is this idea of clean slate operating system. First of all, operating system doesn't mean anything. Nobody knows what an operating system is. Even groups that absolutely, definitely make operating systems, like Linux, Mac OS, Windows, do not agree on what an operating system is. So I think operating system has sort of become this marketing term that anybody can smuggle whatever meaning they want into. So Urbit is an overlay operating system, so it's an operating system that runs on another operating system. And I found it very funny, I think like last year or so, when Holium was making an operating system for Urbit. And I was like, yeah, once they're done that, maybe I will make an operating system for Holium. You know, why not? And then, okay, besides that, the idea of a clean slate is not a real descriptor. It's at best a latent descriptor. It's the descriptor of potential that a system has. So if your system is clean slate, then it doesn't have anything on it. And moreover, that's obviously no longer true. I don't think anybody can look at clay, for example, and say that it's a clean slate. There's a lot going on there. Another Urbit narrative. This one was mentioned in Curtis Yarvin's 2016 LambdaConf. The idea that a Linux server is too complicated to run, so we need something that is so simple your grandma can run it. LOL. I don't think that's. I don't think that Urbit is currently achieving that or on a path to achieve that at any time in the near future. It also sort of conflicts with the idea of owning your own data, because data is inherently complex. Managing it, processing it is complex. And in particular, grandmas are not who Urbit appeals to. Urbit appeals to people who actually have a lot of technical sophistication. I'm going to come back to this idea, but I reject the narrative that the world consists solely of programmers and grandmas. Composability. This one is good. If you follow me on Twitter, you may have seen some of my shit posts about composability. But composability is, again, a sort of vague idea that people want stuff to work better, but it's not really very well defined. Composability is about interoperability of different programs. And it's not something, in my view, that you can get from a system. So a runtime environment and process manager cannot achieve composability in itself. Interoperability comes from agreement on semantics, agreement on what the structure of the data that they're exchanging is, what the operations that can be done on it, which isn't something that comes out of a system. That's something that either the developers of the two programs have to collaborate with each other in order to achieve, or one program has to compromise with the other and accept its data model. In order to achieve this, you have to have in practice, it's easiest if you have a shallow abstraction model. The more complex your abstractions are, the harder it will be to achieve composability. And I think a bullet point I threw in there just this morning, we heard earlier about Aries and Ver. They're both Urbit runtimes, they're both executing knock, they both understand nouns, but even given that, there is still a difficult task of making them interoperable with each other because they have to agree on semantics, not just an encoding model. So this is a lot of work to achieve. And I think people want it to be easy. It would be nice if it were easy. I don't think it is. The way you achieve composability in practice is always with, you need a certain amount of glue code. If you don't have systems that are designed to operate with each other, you will need glue code to make them work together. And also, everyone overestimates how reusable their code is. The desire to reuse code is the source of what we also call dependency hell sometimes. So I put in this tweet here at the bottom from Migrev Dalseg, which I think is just such one of the all-time best tweets I've seen. Reusable components are the biggest male fantasy since sex itself. So good. Okay, Urbit is a computing platform for dads. This was a fun one. The problem is that, so absence of women appeals to a certain tech nerd. Most people don't like that, and I think they'll try to reinvent women from first principles. And in my view, this is the best explanation that exists for dying square. Personal AI agents. This one is very exciting. We heard a lot about this last year. There's only one problem with the personal AI agents narrative, which is that AI agents don't exist. There is no such thing. There are no personal AI agents. There are no corporate AI agents, government AI agents.
That's what makes it so easy to raise money.
Yes. It's a cool narrative, and I think the idea of, personal AI is a very compelling idea. The agent part is bullshit, but personal AI is an intriguing idea. I would encourage everybody to read my blog post on this topic. I think it's quite good. A lot of people have told me it's quite good. At blog.wispem-wantex.xyz about how you could achieve this in practice and what it takes. And it takes a personal server. I will come back to that later. Last bad narrative that I have is that Urbit is a platform for crypto. This is a cool narrative. I think it could be good. There's some stuff that could be done with this. We've had this idea of DeFi front ends hosted on Urbit, which I think more could be done with that. I think it could be good with more work. The problem with this narrative is that crypto is kind of useless. It doesn't do very much right now. Maybe it will at some point, and then it'll be very exciting. Okay, so those are my dubious narratives of Urbit. So I want to return to this point and say, so if we're asking what is Urbit, we have to also consider who is Urbit for. And we've had these two ideas of grandmas and programmers, but I think that model is not very great. That's a marketing narrative that groups people into technical and non-technical, where technical users are assumed to know everything. They can handle anything. They'll put up with unlimited headache. And then there's non-technical users who are just completely clueless. They know nothing. They're afraid of everything to do with computers. They need everything abstracted away and hidden from them. And there's actually a huge middle ground here. There's a lot of users who know some things but not others, who would like to learn more so they can be better users of software. So I've started calling this type of person a semi-programmer. I may expand on this on Twitter later. But this type of person is not a professional programmer, but they know a lot about how computers work. They work with maybe non-Turing complete languages like Excel, Markdown, CSS, which have a lot of overlap with what we think of as programming. And they may know enough programming to configure, to mod a game or to build a website or something like this. And this type of person is usually a pragmatist. So they prefer buttons, like a metonym for clean UIs that have a fairly high level of abstraction, but they can handle code when necessary, when it's appropriate. And ultimately, they know how information works at a certain level, but they rely on tools that are made by other people. And in order to manipulate that data, to view it, to modify it, to store it, and so on. And I think this is really the type of person that makes up most of the ideal market for Urbit at the moment. Because you have programmers can sort of make their own thing no matter what. You have grandmas who are not interested in personal data and high-level determinism. But this is a very large market of computer-literate people who are not necessarily programmers themselves. Okay, so the idea of personal servers is sort of at the core of all of these ideas. So a server at the high level, it's always on, it's publicly addressable, and it runs server software, meaning it's meant to be consumed by, it serves data which is meant to be consumed by clients. What makes it personal is that it is a repository of personal data. So data is really what makes a personal server, in my view. So the question to me, and this is something I expand on a lot in my blog post about AI, data matters a lot. Right now, there are relatively few Urbit apps that you can put real, meaningful personal data in. And you need apps to put data in. You can't just enter it like sort of freeform. But composability, for example, is mostly about access to data. It's about having being able to act directly on data without having to jump through a lot of hoops. And personal AI is about personal data as well. There's a widespread view, I think, that AI is mostly about speed, about GPUs, doing a lot of math really fast. But that actually, when it comes to something like what you might want out of a personal AI, that the benefits of more processing power cap out, not too high, and the quality of the output is actually what you care about a lot more, and that is almost totally down to the quality of the data that you have, the amount of data that you have. So some ideas about how you can get data in a bootstrapped fashion, because it's hard to make an app that starts empty. We've all seen this problem of network effects. It's really hard to get a social media platform off the ground from scratch. So you can write glue code. I have a long-standing project called Offline Twitter where I do basically this. It's just a giant pile of glue code for Twitter, where you can use it. You just scrape data off of Twitter basically and store it in a SQLite database, and that's composable. So I've posted some stuff about this again on Twitter. I don't have a demo for it right now. Maybe I should have, but you can act on that data. You can make other applications that are based on it. You can search through it. You can use it as training data for an AI. You could generate your own custom feed with it, and you don't have to generate all that data from scratch. You don't have to get a huge group of people to churn out content just so you can get started. Another idea that I kind of like is this API aggregator, which is just that. This is sort of borrowed from the evil. We won't say their name, but it starts with a K. You might know them. You can sort of incorporate data from a lot of different services and sort of unify it. And I think that would be a very cool. I think that's a good narrative for Urbit as well. I think, and also I think it's important to say what makes Urbit a good personal server. And in my view, this largely comes down to Azimuth. I think Azimuth is really cool. It's having a hierarchical organization. Organizational structure means you don't have the problems, you don't have most of the decentralization related problems, but you also maximize freedom, which is most of what people want from decentralization. And this works really well with a personal server because personal data often has a social angle. A lot of content is implicitly social. You want to share it with people. Azimuth makes it really easy to do, basically trivial to do this because you have the whole, you have the ID system, you have the network. So I sort of think of Urbit as a server-side app store, maybe the first server-side app store, or I've called it a platform for building peer-to-peer applications, which, I think the takeaway for developers maybe is to think in a data-centric way. Think what data does my app use? What does it store? What does it look like? And I'm now going to give a demo of such an app. Okay, time to fudge shrubbery. Okay, so I've been contemplating this project codenamed Herbicide. That's not a real name. Nothing in the nothing actually uses that, but I just think it's funny. What I'm about to show here is like maybe 70% real or serious. I don't actually disagree with or dislike Shrubbery in terms of their goals. I just want to see if there is an easier way to achieve like an 80-20 type of solution, so we can get something like composability without rewriting the kernel, as much fun as that is. So basically, in this model, I use Clay as the data store instead of Gall, sort of re-borrowing the Unix philosophy in some ways. So in Gall, we store data as state. So a Gall agent has this state at the top, and all the application data is treated as state. So this is sort of inherently anti-composable because there's one app which has the data, and then all the other apps have to request it in order to do anything with it. The idea of storing data in Clay is that it's independent of apps, much like how certain level of composability can be achieved on Earth. So for example, if you have, you might use Photoshop to make an image, and then you might have some presentation software where you include that image, and you might send that image by an email to someone else. And all these programs are working on the same data because that image is stored as a file. It's not owned by any one of the apps. And so composability just sort of falls out of having access to the data. So that's what I'd like to demo now. So as background, I have written a markdown parser in Hoon and a renderer for it. And so basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to demo two apps which are using Clay as a data store. They're going to operate on the same data. One of them's going to write it, one of them's going to read it. And together they sort of comprise a little blog software with auto-index pages and a couple of neat features. Okay. I'll make this bigger. Okay, so I have I have a fake ship here. I've created a, is that big enough? It's not, okay. I've created a desk called My Documents. So the downside of using Clay is that it's sort of a little bit awkward to use for this purpose. A lot of people warned me about that on Twitter when I first floated this idea. They were correct. So I've created this desk called My Documents where I'm going to just use it as a data store. It doesn't have any apps in itself. And then, so in principle, you could have a file structure inside that. I've just created this directory called Files. Okay, so no. Okay, so I have a, which one should I show first? I'll show this one. Okay, so I've created a markdown renderer. So you can just put arbitrary markdown. It's basically, at this point, nearly GitHub spec compliant. It's got all the basic markdown and some of the GitHub flavor extensions. So something like this renders like something like that. So you've got headings, stylized text, emphasis and bold and italic nested inside each other, block quotes, lists, images, links, code blocks, inline code. So if this is like a very shitty version of an app also made by Migros Volseg called Sky, which is much better, but this works for now. So I'm going to enter, I'm calling this syntax guide. I'm going to save it. And so this is bouncing off the app which I've called renderer. It's saving it as a file in Clay as a parsed data structure. So it is not saving this as text. So I can maybe show that in, dojo, 1 second. My scry command. So in the dojo, I should be able to scry that out. This is what it's written. This is the data structure. So it's basically a list of, the hierarchical list of nodes. So I can scry that out. And this is actually, this is not a nest fail. This is a data structure of type markdown. And it is stored at this path in, is this big enough, by the way? Yeah. It's stored as, okay, this is actually another file. This is the grant proposal that I did for the markdown parser. But, so it's actually storing it as this. And if I make a modification to this file, okay, so this is the grant proposal. Let me scry the one I just made. I'll call that syntax guide. Okay, so this is the syntax guide that I just saved. So at the top, like, there's all this text with W's. So I should be able to overwrite that by, I'm just going to change some of these to like J. Just to demo this. Did somebody just wish the demo curse on me? Okay. So if I scry this again, I should get, yeah, so it's updated there. I should be able to see that, yeah, so now it's got a bunch of J's in it. And I actually have this mounted as a desk in Unix. So if I, maybe I use head on syntax guide. So I can see this modification. So this is now saved as text. In order to achieve this, you just have to implement the, this is largely achieved by mark files. So you have to be able to, you have to have a mark file which can convert from MIME and to MIME. And then this effortlessly lets you store data in Clay. And so if I modify this, it is actually not doing a full rewrite of the entire, well, it's replacing that node, but due to noun deduplication, it's not going to cause like an insane amount of data usage, basically. Okay, so I've got this, I've got these markdown stuff. This is a preview on the right, and then I've also created a separate application that I'm calling blog, which is here. So this is like an auto-generated index page. I didn't update anything here. It just, due to the fact that I created a new post in that directory, it's detected it, and it's generated a preview for it. So that's this one here. And then I can go to it, and then got all this stuff. Something cool about storing parsed data as in this fashion is that I can now, it's just a tree, so I can traverse the tree, and I can pull out interesting stuff. So for example, I've got this list of headers. This is just generated on the fly. If I edit this, we should be able to see it's different. Blah, 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 blah. So I'm just saving this. It's going to commit it to, did it commit it? It did not, because I didn't name it, that's why.
You forgot to pick the file.
Yeah. This is the worst text editor ever, but it works for now. Okay, file name. So now, yeah, so it's been written to Clay. I can see it in Unix because it's mounted. And the blog app, which neither of these are storing that data as their state, it updates here. And this heading, again, it's auto-generated from the data structure. And I also had these preview images, the thumbnails, are also, that's another example of the same thing. You can just traverse the data structure, find the first image. That's the thumbnail image for your blog post. Yeah, so that's basically that's my demo. And the idea here is that this sort of achieves some of what Shrubbery is after in a much more lightweight way. Yes, I think that's all I've got to say. Thank you. Question?
Yeah, what was it about Clay that was so difficult for you to work with?
The difficult part of clay is that it's, I think most of it comes from the fact, the desk format. So desks are really opinionated about what you put in them. So first of all, you can't put desks inside each other. So in order to achieve this, having different apps that are looking at the same data, you have to, again, you have to have some agreement on semantics. So any app which wanted to use this model based on my, like this particular renderer would have to know my documents. Like it would just have to memorize that string or agree on some format like that. So that's a little clunky. It's not too bad. I imagine it would get worse the more things I tried to do with this. Mark files are not that bad, honestly. They're actually kind of cool in some ways. You do have to write a mark file for whatever data type you want to store in Clay, but that's not too hard. Yeah, I think Clay is sort of designed, I could be wrong, but it seems to be largely designed for compiling Hoon code, and then the idea of using it as a file system is sort of like a secondary thought. Would you agree with that, Ted?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So that reflects a little bit. Yes, please.
I would note that Clay has effectively been downscoped over the past 8 years from originally being designed much more for the kinds of things that you're using it for, including the renderer system with Word and Clay. That was the way that Urbit served the old Fora old Fora website in 2016, 2017. And that used the whole system of reading data from Markdown files out of Clay. And as they say, time is a flat circle. Not to say this is a bad idea at all, just that, yeah, basically we moved away from that because Clay was such a pain to try to do that stuff with for a whole slew of reasons that I'd be happy to talk to people about afterward. But yeah, what happened then is that we started using Clay for over-the-air updates and storing the source code that's used to load kernel and applications, and then we made it good at that, and it's not really good at anything else as far as we can tell.
Yeah, that seems pretty reasonable.
They could do this, yeah, but I think you're right that as you try to do more with it, it'll get harder and harder.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
How could you say that clay is, I guess, less complex than like shrubbery, given that it's shrubbery is roughly 2/3 the line count of clay?
I don't think it's less complex. I think it exists, like now. That's basically what I'm getting at here is, I think this is like an interesting thing to play around with until something much better comes along. And yeah, I basically agree with most of the direction of shrubbery. I just don't want to wait.
You should call it herbicide, you should call it like grass or something.
Why? Because it's a precursor?
House plant.
House plant, yeah.
4 legs.
Sure.
I mean, I think it would be reasonable to make, a desk with one agent on it that kind of abstracts over Clay a little bit and would be easy to write to. And then, then we would have something to, kind of coalesce on, like you're describing, like, oh, we need a know to go with my documents, right?
I think the problem with that is that reading data out of Gull is really annoying. You have a couple of options, and most of them are bad. Reading from Clay is like pretty straightforward. I guess that's the and also like I don't know that such an agent would be necessary. Like what would it add to the like what benefit would it add over just reading from Clay and writing?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know, but I could imagine like there are some like standardized things that you would want to do to Clay, like to these stage structures that like aren't covered exactly by marks, but you don't necessarily want to always do them in any application because it's always the same thing, right?
Yeah, like if you wanted to do so you could use Clay already to like take a markdown file and render it as HTML, but if you wanted to render it as like a what you see is what you get HTML, then you need like application logic on it. You kind of want it like integrated with the representation of the data.
What do you mean by that?
Why isn't an agent then?
Well, yeah, like that's what Hunter's saying. Like you kind of want like agent logic kind of like interspersed with like the source of truth.
Oh yeah, you can combine them.
Yeah.
Composability.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's actually, I mean, that's basically what I did. I have my renderer app, which is really the editor app, whatever, is basically doing that. So it does the parsing in it, and then if it succeeds, it writes it to Clay and so forth, and vice versa with the rendering. Any others? Okay, thank you very much. And read my blog post, it's really good.